Hello everyone, today we're going to learn how to play chess. I'm going to teach you how the pieces move and the basics of chess. Now, I understand that chess can be an intimidating game when you don't know the rules and you don't know how the pieces move. So today we're going to break down how the pieces move in a very simple way so that we can have a clear understanding on how to play the game. And by the end of this, you'll at least know the rules. Although learning the rules and how the pieces move is simple, but learning to master the game of chess might take a lifetime. Okay, so let's begin. Let's clear this board here. And let's begin with just a knight in the center of the board. So your horse here is called a knight. And it can move in an L shape. So the knight can move one square up and two to the left or two to the right, or two squares up or down and one to the left or one to the right. So what you see here is the knight in the center of the board creates this kind of circle, this radius of squares in which it can jump to. So a knight in the center of the board is a very powerful piece indeed. It can move forward to attack, it can move backwards to retreat, and it can be a very tricky piece because the knight is the only piece that can jump over other pieces. But let's clear the board, and let's bring our knight to the center of the board. Now let's see where can the knight go. Now the knight can only go two squares. So before, the knight had this big circle where he could move to. Now the knight can only move two squares. Two squares up, one to the right, or one square up and two to the right. So there is a famous saying in chess, a knight on the rim is dim. So this would be a very, very poor piece indeed. Now, let's clear this position and let's bring one of our bishops to the board. Now, the bishop has the same sort of advantage as the knight does in the center of the board. In the center of the board, it's at its most powerful, as it can move any square at once along any of the diagonals. But notice a severe weakness in the bishop. Because it is a white squared bishop, it can never move to the dark squares here. It can never move to any of the dark squares. Ever. So it's kind of hampered in. If I just so no matter what happens in the game, a light square bishop will only be able to move on these light squares. So that's something to consider. And later, when you learn chess strategy, you'll learn why that is important. Okay, let's clear the board here now. And let's move to the rook. Now, like the other two pieces, the rook is at its strongest when it's in the center of the board, as it can move up, backwards or forwards, and up and down as many squares which are free, as long as there isn't a piece in front of the rook. However, in the middle game, rooks being in the center of the board can become targets. And often, you'll only find rooks occupying the center of the board during the endgame, when a lot of the other pieces have been cleared from the board. Okay, now for the most powerful piece in chess, we have the queen. The queen has the luxury of being able to move as a rook and as a bishop combined. Now, it cannot move in the same way as a knight can move. So it can't jump over pieces, and it can't do L shapes. But otherwise, a queen is like a combination of a rook and a bishop. And it is the most powerful piece in chess. Of course, although it's the most powerful piece in chess, it is not the most important piece in chess. Because the most important piece in chess is your king. The king can move in any direction, but it can only move one square at a time. Now, the game is over when the king has no more squares to move. So if it was the king's next move and it can't move anywhere without being captured, the game is over. That's called checkmate. And I'll explain more about that a little later. Okay, so now let's go ahead and go all the way back. Let's start a new game. Now we can see how the pieces move in action. So, the pawns can move 2 squares on their first move, or 1 square, depending on what they would like to do. The knights can jump over pieces. So in this example, the knight can come to this square, right? And okay, the bishops can move when they're free. But notice that this bishop cannot move because it cannot jump over any pieces. Okay. Now, the pawn has a choice between moving 2 squares or 1 square. So let's pretend in this example that the pawn will move here. Okay, and here's the bishop. The bishop cannot move past this pawn, but it can move here. And there's a special move that the king can make in order to protect itself. If you move the queen 2 spaces to the right on its first move, it can castle kingside. This is called castling. And this puts your queen on this side of the board, which makes it a little bit more safe, a little bit more protected than being in the center of the board. Now, as we talked about, pieces are at their most powerful when they are in the center of the board. These 4 squares make up the center of the board. So both sides, when we begin an opening, try to control these 4 squares. These are the 4 most important squares in chess, as they often dictate who will win, because whoever controls the center of the board often has an advantage in their piece play. Okay, so let's go back. Let's take a look at some possible moves in chess. This is a possible game, although this is not like the best game. This is not like some great opening, but this is how the pieces could move. So you see the bishops are moving diagonally, the knights are moving in L shapes, and the queens can move in any direction they'd like. Okay. Now, there is some funny aspects to capturing pieces in chess. For example, pawns can move forward, but they can only capture diagonally. So if black were to play here, white can capture black's pawn. So pawns can only capture diagonally, whereas the other pieces can capture in the same manner in which they can move. So the knight can move in an L, so if it chose to, it could capture this piece. Although here, that would be a mistake because white could recapture. And now let's look at an example of checkmate. When the queen does not have any possible squares to go. Let's see here. Okay, so in this example, the king cannot move. Actually, see, the king cannot move in any square. And so the game is over. Because no matter what move black were to do, imagine if black were to make a move, the white queen could capture. So the game would be over. So that's called checkmate. And whenever the king is in danger of being captured, that is a position of check. So for example, not that you should do this, but were the queen to come here, he would be threatening to capture the king on his next move. So oftentimes people will say check to announce that white can't make any other moves unless he gets himself out of danger. Unless he gets the king out of danger. Here, white could do so by just capturing the queen. And now there would be no more check. Check. Okay. So that is the concept. Okay, so that is how the pieces move. That is how the pieces capture, and that is check and checkmate. So I hope that moving the pieces is a little less intimidating for you now. And if you have any questions, please leave a comment below, and I will be happy to answer your questions. And if you're just starting and you want to play a game, let me know, and I'll be happy to play a game with you. So until next time, this is Chess for Beginners. I will continue making more videos, and progressively I'll make the lessons a little bit more complicated. Perhaps in the next lesson, I will teach you a little bit of basic opening strategy and theory. All right, thank you. Until next time.